Anthony, I'm so glad you're here. Have you heard about Monster Under the Sea?
You probably can't understand me. Have you guys ever heard of the monster under the sea? Well, you're going to learn about him today. Let me get ready. Mrs. Lawson here, fourth graders. I'm so excited that you're here to learn all about the monster beneath the sea today. Let me share my slides and we will get started. Oh man, you're never going to believe this. So, we are learning today to describe and analyze plot events. So that's just events in the story to help us understand and form opinions about the story. We know we are successful when we can find the details in the text, identify major events in the plot, and make an inference about the story. So when we're describing an event, readers can analyze and describe an event by using specific details and what happens and what the characters do and say. So first off, we're going to start with some vocabulary. So we have this word right here. Do you know what it says? You see that prefix decay. So it's decay. So let's look at what it says in the story. Grateful and filled with hope, the artist accompanied the god to the seashore and sat down on a decaying dock. And if we look at this apple, it starts off really good, just like what we like to eat. Oh my goodness, look how gross that looks. So what could decay mean? Awesome job, fourth graders. It means to rot or to decompose. So it's kind of falling apart. Kind of see this tree's falling apart, and so is that apple. What about this word? Yeah, it's torrent. So let's read from the story. The god and fish wrestled, rolling over and over, creating a storm of sand along the ocean floor and a torrent of waves up above. There will always be earthquakes, the fish declared. So what could that word mean? It's a stream of water flowing with great rapid violence, so a really strong wave. So for your foundational skill today, you are going to have a passage to read, and it's about a visit with dolphins, really focusing on the roots aqua and dict. So it is about Mace. So Mace had been looking forward to the trip on a dolphin watching boat for a long time. So excited for you to read that and figure out what happens. Okay, wait. What's a myth, fourth graders? Do you remember? Yes, a myth is a story that often explains how and why something in the world came to be. So we're going to figure out today, we're reading this myth called The Monster Beneath the Sea. We're going to figure out what is this myth explaining today. So deep in the ocean, let me get my spotlight, get my arrow. Deep in the ocean off the coast of Japan lived a catfish named Namazu. Like all catfish, Namazu didn't need to use his small eyes to find his way around the salty water. He used his cat-like whiskers to sense the sea around him. With a flick of his tail, he was propelled whichever way he wanted to go. But Namazu was different from the other catfish of the Pacific Ocean in one important way. He was enormous, a monster-sized fish that lived alone in a rocky layer along the ocean floor. Namazu was so large that even the smallest flick of his tail caused giant waves to crash on the shore above and stirred earthquakes throughout the island nation of Japan. When Namazu wiggled, even just a tiny bit, the buildings in Japan rattled. Glass windows shattered. Shelves collapsed, scattering merchants' goods across floors. Tea spilled. The very earth groaned and cracked. The people knew how to duck their heads and run for shelter. No one was safe when Namazu shook his massive tail. One day, a young artist was at his work table using a sharp chisel to create a woodcut. He'd spent months crafting a detailed representation of the capital city of Edo where he lived. Painstakingly, he etched out shapes and lines of shops, buildings, streets, and miniature people in an intricate design. The woodcut was nearly finished, ready to be covered, when, sorry, I lost my place. Ready to be covered with ink and pressed against a sheet of parchment. Very carefully, he set his knife against the block for the final stroke. When far below the sea, Namazu decided it was time to stretch out and move around. The giant catfish inched along the deep, dark surface of the sea. Using his whiskers, he smelled and tasted the sea. He moved past a school of tuna and through a seaweed garden. Then, near a long, rocky coral reef, Namazu raised his tail and smacked it against the ocean floor. Sand splattered. A whirl of water bubbled from the impact. With a boom and a bang, the crust of the earth crumbled. Oh, I think fourth graders, I know what this myth is telling us. It's telling us what's happening. So what do you think this myth is explaining? Let's keep reading. A crack expanded out from the place Namazu's tail slapped down and continued along the seafloor. Energy under the Earth's crust built up until it was dangerously stressed. And then it exploded. The entire island of Japan shook violently as the ground quaked. The earthquake knocked over the artist's work table, toppling his tools to the ground. The chisel he'd been using to carve a tiny pagoda slipped, leaving a deep, jagged scratch across the small square of wood. The artist looked at his wood block. It was ruined. So, really quick, let's pause and think. How do Namazu's actions on page 32 form an important plot point? So that's just a fancy way of saying, how is this an important part of the story? What Namazu does on this page, let's read a little bit more into the next page and see, what does that action of Namazu do to the rest of the story? Tears filled his eyes. This was not the first time a swish of Namazu's tail had caused a quake that destroyed his work. Broken bits of block littered the workshop floor. The artist closed his eyes and sighed. He did not want to start over again. In that moment, he decided to quit and give up his dreams of becoming an accomplished artist who would have his work displayed in every home and shop throughout Japan. He would look for a more practical job, one that would not be affected by Namazu's many quakes. Perhaps he should become a bricklayer, repairing the buildings that were constantly toppling down. That's so sad. As the artist began to pack his tools into a canvas bag, he heard commotion outside on the street. He left his studio to discover that people were gathering in the town's central square. "We must do something about Namazu," the baker said. His jacket was covered with spilled rice flour, dust, and splattered with frosting. "I agree." A woman came from the tea ceremony house carrying pieces of an ornate broken kettle and shard of ruined teacups. Behind her, parents, children, bankers, chefs, and merchants gathered. The entire town was uniting for an important meeting. "This has gone on too long," the baker said, standing before the assembly. "We must call upon Kashima to help us." A hush settled over the crowd. No one made a sound. "Kashima is too busy to handle this matter," a woman said as she cradled a small baby in her hand. "He is the god of martial arts and must oversee the dojos." Dojos were the training centers for students learning karate, judo, and samurai. Okay, so we're going to pause really quick and go back to this question. So what do Namazu's actions do? So let's go back to this page. What were his actions? What did he do in this picture? Good job, fourth graders. Yes, it says right here, the giant catfish inched along the deep, dark surface of the sea. So he's inching along, then he raises his tail and smacked it against the ocean floor. And that causes what? Down here. What did that cause? Yeah, it causes an earthquake. And why is that important? Like, what are the effects for these people? Let's pause it, and I'll give you a second to look back on this page. So hopefully you paused this video and you took a minute to look back on this page. So right here, what does that baker say? He says, we must do something about Namazu. And they say, I agree. And then down here, it says the entire town was united. So this earthquake united the people and showed us what the big issue is going to be in the story. The people are fed up with this catfish, and we're going to figure out what are they going to do about it. So let's keep reading. He is the sword god and must visit his shrines, someone else added. The baker said, Kashima is the only god who can protect us from Namazu. After a long moment, the artist stepped forward. He sat down his bag of tools. I will go. I will ask Kashima for help. The artist heard people talking about his bravery as he left the square, but he didn't feel very brave. He was only doing what he felt was necessary, and he was scared. The artist went to the dojo to find Kashima. The god was in the shrine, listening to prayers and accepting offerings. There was a long line that wrapped around the building. The artist stood in the back and waited his turn. As he moved closer to where the god sat, his knees began to shake. A bead of nervous sweat formed on the artist's forehead. He had never spoken to a god directly before and did not know what to expect. Would the god listen to his requests and offer assistance? Or would the god laugh and send him away in shame? A woman left the dojo crying. A man walked by smiling. A child came out of the shrine carrying a bag of gold coins. A young couple emerged, arms wrapped happily around each other. When the artist reached the front of the line, he was terrified to be in such a mighty presence. His words felt thick in his throat as he explained about Namazu and the earthquakes. Kashima immediately understood the importance of the artist's plea. He announced, I will go and speak to Namazu. Grateful and filled with hope, the artist accompanied the god to the seashore and sat down on a decaying dock. He would wait there until Kashima returned. Kashima descended under the sea and found Namazu resting in his lair. I have come behalf on the people of Japan, Kashima told the fish. The earthquakes are destroying their town. Buildings are unsafe. People are getting hurt. It would be against my nature as a fish not to shake my tail, Namazu said. You can choose to control yourself, Kashima said. You must avoid hitting the bottom of the sea. Stop making trouble for the island. No, Namazu laughed. I won't. I like to smack my tail on the bottom of the sea. I like it when the earth shakes. You are putting the island in danger. He raised his sword and demanded, no more earthquakes. The fish replied with a laugh. Kashima pinned Namazu's tail to the ground with two long blades. The fish gave a mighty roar and with a great thrust of his body broke free. You cannot stop me, Namazu declared. Watch this. Kashima, I can make small tremors. He wiggled his tail and the land above shivered. Or large quakes that will destroy entire cities. Namazu raised his tail, ready to show Kashima his power and destructive force. Kashima looked quickly around. Swords were a mighty weapon, but not solid enough to hold the monster fish. He needed something bigger, stronger, and heavier. Near the lair, Kashima found what he needed. I have promised to help the people of Japan, Kashima told Namazu. With a mighty roar, Kashima leapt on the great catfish's back. It was well known that Kashima was not only the sword god and the god of martial arts, but he was also an expert at sumo, the Japanese sport of wrestling. The god and fish wrestled, rolling over and over, creating a storm of sand along the ocean floor and a torrent of waves up above. There will always be earthquakes, the fish declared. Not while I'm here. Raising a giant rock on the ocean floor, Kashima thrust the rock onto Namazu's back. With all his might, the catfish tried to get out from under the stone, but he could not free himself. Exhausted, Namazu lowered his tail in defeat. He was trapped, unable to create the smallest earthquake or even a tiny water wave. With Namazu safely imprisoned, Kashima rose to the surface of the water and met the young artist at the shore. "It is done," Kashima announced. "Thank you," the artist said. He gave the god an offering of fruit and flowers. The people of Edo came to the dock to sing Kashima's praises. "I will stay below the ocean and make sure that Namazu doesn't break free," Kashima told the people, "but I cannot watch him every minute of every day. There are times I must visit my shrines and accept my offerings." Kashima tilted his head towards a fishing boat that floated in the harbor. "When I am gone, Ibisu, the god of the fishermen, will protect the city." "Ibisu is known to fall asleep on the job," the young artist reminded the god in a whisper. "True, it has happened before," Kashima considered the problem. He looked out to sea, towards the spot where Namazu was secured under the rock. To the artist, he said, "You must create an earthquake warning system. Design an image of Namazu and tell people to place it on road signs throughout Japan. It's important that the people know what to do if Namazu swishes his tail." "I will begin the artwork right away," the young artist assured Kashima with a quick bow. Kashima bowed low to the men and the women of Edo, then turned and disappeared into the sea. And that's the story. That's the myth. So what details in the myth explain why earthquakes still occur in Japan if Namazu is imprisoned in the ocean floor? So look back on this page and let's figure out, why are there still earthquakes if Namazu is imprisoned? I'm going to pause the video, you should too, and look back in the text. All right, hopefully you paused that video, and up here you noticed, so it says, "I will stay below the ocean and make sure that they don't break free, but I can't watch them all the time." So what is the plan for when he has to leave, this god? Yes, the plan is that the god of the fishermen is the one that's going to watch over Kashima. Right? Kashima said that, right? So he's going to watch over the fish. But why will there still be earthquakes? Yes, good job, guys. They said, if he falls asleep, that he's still going to get out. Namazu is still going to be able to get out and cause some problems. So they need to be prepared for when he does get out, because people can't watch him all the time, and Ibisu might fall asleep. So good job looking back and finding those details in the text. All right, your reading response for today is go back, describe the conversation between Namazu and Kashima. It begins on the bottom of page 34, so right around here, where he says, "I have come on behalf of the people of Japan." Start there and describe to me what happens between the two. Why does it turn into a wrestling match? Great job, fourth graders. I'm so glad you got to learn about the monster of the sea with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.